The sound of shattering glass pierced the evening air as Daisy Valmont's trembling fingers gripped the edge of the upright piano. It was 1876 in Petaluma, California, and the saloon had erupted into chaos around her. Men shouted, chairs scraped against wooden floors, and someone fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Yet through it all, Daisy's hands remained frozen above the ivory keys, her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the door where three men in dusty clothes and menacing expressions had just barged in. "Keep playing," hissed Mabel, the saloon owner, as she ducked behind the bar. "Whatever happens, just keep playing." Daisy swallowed hard and placed her fingers back on the keys. Her repertoire was pathetically limited: one song, the only piece she had ever managed to learn completely despite years of trying. Her mother had called it a waste of a fine piano, shipped all the way from New York City to their small California homestead. But now, as men reached for their guns and tension filled the room, that single melody was all she had. The notes of "Beautiful Dreamer" floated through the chaos, strangely delicate and incongruous against the backdrop of violence. Daisy played with closed eyes, fingers finding the familiar patterns as they had countless times before. The song continued, her only shield against the madness unfolding around her. A gunshot rang out closer this time, making her jump, but she didn't stop playing. Then another shot, followed by a heavy thud. Someone had fallen. Still, she played on, the sweet melody now a stark contrast to the scene of violence. "That's enough." A deep voice cut through the din, commanding and steady. Daisy's eyes flew open. Standing in the center of the saloon was a tall man she'd never seen before, his gun drawn but pointed at the ceiling. His dark clothes were covered in trail dust, but there was something in his stance that radiated authority. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the room before landing on the three troublemakers now frozen in place. "This ends now," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly quiet room. "Drop your weapons and get out." The three men hesitated, calculating their odds against this stranger. Something in his unwavering gaze must have convinced them the odds weren't good. They slowly placed their guns on the nearest table and backed toward the door. "Don't come back," the stranger said simply. Only when they disappeared into the night did Daisy realize her fingers were still moving, the familiar melody continuing on its own accord. She stopped abruptly, embarrassed by her nervous reaction. The stranger holstered his gun and turned toward the piano. For the first time, she got a clear look at his face, strong features framed by dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt, with a few days' worth of stubble shadowing his jaw. But it was his eyes that held her attention, a startling shade of blue that seemed to take in everything with a single glance. "Don't stop on my account," he said, his voice softer now as he approached the piano. "That was mighty pretty." Daisy's cheeks warmed. "It's the only song I know," she admitted, smoothing her skirts nervously. The stranger's mouth curved into a slight smile. "Then it's a good thing it's a nice one." He touched the brim of his hat in a small gesture of respect. "Quentin O'Malley. Most folks just call me Quinn." "Daisy Valmont," she replied, extending her hand before thinking better of it. Ladies didn't typically shake hands with strange men in saloons, but he took it anyway, his calloused palm rough against her fingers. "Miss Valmont," he acknowledged, releasing her hand after a brief moment. "Might I hear that song again?" In full this time, without the gunfire accompaniment. Before Daisy could respond, Mabel emerged from behind the bar, her gray hair escaping from its pins. "You'll hear it plenty, mister. Our Daisy plays every night." She glanced at the piano player with a mix of affection and exasperation. "Just that one song, mind you, but she plays it well enough." Quentin raised an eyebrow. Only the one. Daisy's embarrassment deepened. I never had much formal training. This piece, it was my father's favorite. He taught it to me before he died. Something in Quentin's expression softened. Then I'd be honored to hear it again. Daisy turned back to the piano, grateful for the familiar task that would hide her flushed face from view. As she began to play once more, the saloon gradually returned to normal around her, drinks being poured, conversations resuming, the usual evening business continuing as though the near shootout had never happened. When she finished, she was surprised to find Quentin still standing by the piano, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Beautiful," he said simply. "It's just beautiful, dreamer," she replied with a small shrug. "Nothing special. I wasn't just talking about the song." His eyes met hers briefly before he tipped his hat again. "Good night, Miss Valmont. I suspect I'll be seeing you tomorrow." Daisy watched him walk away, settling at a table in the corner where he ordered a whiskey and a meal. She had no idea who Quincy O'Malley was, or why he'd intervened in the fight, but something told her that his arrival in Petaluma might change things, perhaps even for her. The following evening, Daisy arrived at the Golden Nugget saloon earlier than usual, smoothing down her best dress, a modest blue affair that had seen better days but still managed to bring out the color of her eyes, or so her mother had always said. She had spent extra time on her hair, arranging the honey-colored strands in a simple but elegant style. "Well, don't you look nice?" Mabel commented when Daisy entered through the back door. The older woman gave her a knowing look. "You're early." "I thought I might practice a bit," Daisy replied, avoiding Mabel's gaze. "Practice? The one song you know," Mabel laughed. "Honey, you've been playing that song every night for 2 years. I don't think practice is what brought you here early." Daisy felt her cheeks warm. "I don't know what you mean. Our new visitor made quite an impression, didn't he?" Mabel wiped down the bar with practiced motions. "Can't say I blame you. Not often we get a man like that in here, one who stops trouble instead of starting it. Do you know anything about him?" Daisy asked, trying to sound casual as she adjusted the piano bench. "Not much. Checked into the hotel yesterday. Paid for 2 weeks up front. Rumor has it he's some kind of lawman, though he's not wearing a badge." Mabel paused her wiping. "Now, don't go getting ideas, girl. Men like that don't stay in one place long." Daisy ran her fingers lightly over the piano keys. "I don't have ideas, Mabel. I'm just curious is all. Hum." Mabel didn't sound convinced. "Well, curious or not, you're still playing tonight. The regulars expect it." The saloon began filling up as the evening progressed. Daisy played her song at intervals, filling the time between with simple scales and chords that didn't quite constitute music, but provided a pleasant background noise. She scanned the room repeatedly, but there was no sign of Quincy O'Malley. By 9 o'clock, she had resigned herself to disappointment. Perhaps he had only been passing through after all, or maybe he had found more exciting entertainment elsewhere in town. Why would he return just to hear the same song again? She was midway through "Beautiful Dreamer" for the 3rd time that evening when the saloon doors swung open. Quentin entered, pausing just inside to survey the room. His clothes were cleaner tonight, his face freshly shaved, revealing a strong jaw and the hint of a dimple in his right cheek. His eyes found her almost immediately, and he nodded in greeting. Daisy nearly missed a note but recovered quickly, focusing intently on the keys as he made his way to the bar. She could hear his low voice as he exchanged words with Mabel, but couldn't make out what they were saying. When she finished the song, she was startled to find him standing beside the piano, 2 glasses in hand. "Mabel said you might appreciate some lemonade," he said, offering her one of the glasses. "It's warm work playing all evening." "Thank you," she said, accepting the drink gratefully. Up close, She could see that his eyes weren't simply blue but had flecks of gray in them, like the sky after a storm. "I didn't think you'd come back. I said I would." He took a sip from his own glass, which contained something stronger than lemonade. "Besides, I wanted to hear your song again." "You'll grow tired of it quickly enough," she warned. "Everyone does eventually." "I doubt that." He leaned against the piano, watching her with an intensity that made her nervous. "How'd you come to be playing in a saloon, Miss Valmont, if you don't mind my asking?" Daisy traced the rim of her glass with one finger. "Life doesn't always turn out as planned, Mr. O'Malley. My father died 3 years ago. The farm couldn't sustain itself. My mother and I moved to town, and she took in washing while I looked for work. Mabel needed someone to play the piano, and I was the closest thing to a musician in Petaluma." She attempted a smile. "Even if my repertoire is somewhat limited. And your mother, is she well?" The question caught her off guard. Most men didn't inquire about families, especially not in a place like this. "She passed last winter. Pneumonia." Daisy swallowed hard, the grief still fresh. "I live in a small room above the milliner's shop now." Quentin's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry for your losses, Miss Valmont. I know something of what it's like to be alone in the world." Before she could respond, a commotion at one of the card tables drew their attention. 2 men were arguing loudly, accusations of cheating flying back and forth. "If you'll excuse me," Quentin said, setting his glass down. "Seems I might be needed again." She watched as he approached the table, his manner calm but authoritative. Within minutes, he had diffused the situation without so much as touching his gun. The 2 men grudgingly shook hands and resumed their game. When he returned to the piano, Daisy couldn't help but ask, "Are you a lawman, Mr. O'Malley?" A shadow crossed his face. "Used to be U.S. Marshal for a time. And now?" "Now I'm just passing through," he said, his tone suggesting the subject was closed. "Would you play your song again, Miss Valmont? It seems to have a calming effect on the patrons." Daisy obliged, keenly aware of his presence as he leaned against the wall nearby, watching her hands move across the keys. When she finished, he applauded softly. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. She nodded, trying not to appear too eager. "I'm here every night." "Then so am I," he replied, touching his hat brim before returning to his table in the corner. For the next week, the pattern continued. Quentin would arrive each evening, listen to Daisy play, bring her a glass of lemonade, and they would talk during her breaks. Their conversations gradually deepened, moving beyond polite exchanges to genuine sharing. She learned that he was 32 years old, had been born in Boston but had spent most of his adult life in the West, and had no family to speak of. "What made you leave the Marshalls?" she asked one night, feeling brave after he had shared stories of his time tracking outlaws across the Oklahoma Territory. Quentin's expression darkened. "Lost my partner in a shootout in Dodge City. Man named Harrison. Best friend I ever had." He took a long drink. After that, the badge felt too heavy. "I'm sorry," Daisy said softly. "It must be difficult losing someone you're close to. It was a while back now." His voice was gruff. "But yes, some days are harder than others." Daisy understood all too well. "When my father died, I couldn't play the piano for months. His song, it hurt too much." She ran her fingers lightly over the keys. "Then one day I realized playing it made me feel closer to him somehow, like he was still listening." Quentin studied her face, his expression unreadable. "You've got a good heart, Daisy Valmont." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made her heart beat faster. "Play it again," he requested, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. She did, putting all her emotion into the familiar melody, aware of his eyes on her the entire time. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "I should tell you something," he finally said. "I'm not just passing through Petaluma. I'm here looking for someone." Daisy's heart sank. Of course he had a purpose here beyond listening to her play the same song night after night. Oh, 3 brothers. The Hargrove gang. They robbed a bank in Sacramento last month, shot a teller. Word is they're hiding out somewhere near here. His eyes met hers. "I'm not wearing a badge anymore, but I made a promise to a friend in the Sacramento sheriff's office. I aim to keep it. You're hunting dangerous men. Alone." Daisy couldn't keep the concern from her voice. "Been doing it most of my adult life," he replied with a shrug. "But I wanted you to know in case." He trailed off, leaving the potential consequences unspoken. "In case something happens to you," she finished for him. He nodded once, his jaw tight. "I don't expect trouble, but in my experience it tends to find me regardless of expectations." "Is that why you've been here every night, watching for these men?" Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, perhaps. "No, Daisy. I've been here because for the first time in a long while I've found something that brings me peace." His gaze softened. "Your song, your company." Daisy felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Well then," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I suppose I'll have to keep playing until you finish your business here." The corner of his mouth lifted in a half-smile. "I'd like that." The next evening, Quentin didn't appear at his usual time. Daisy played Beautiful Dreamer twice, glancing at the door each time it opened, but he never walked through. By closing time, worry had settled like a stone in her stomach. "Maybe he just needed a night off," Mabel suggested as she counted the evening's earnings. "Men don't always keep to schedules like we do." "He said he'd be here," Daisy insisted, gathering her shawl around her shoulders. "Something's wrong, I can feel it." Mabel sighed. "Don't go getting yourself worked up over a man you've known barely a week, girl. That's a road to heartache if ever I saw one." But Daisy couldn't shake her concern. As she walked home through the quiet streets of Petaluma, she kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see Quentin's tall figure following at a distance to ensure she reached home safely, as he had done the past few nights. Sleep eluded her that night. She tossed and turned, imagining all manner of terrible scenarios: Quentin wounded, lying somewhere alone, or worse. By morning, she had resolved to look for him, starting with the hotel where Mabel said he was staying. The desk clerk at the Western Hotel was initially reluctant to provide any information about their guests, but Daisy's obvious distress eventually softened him. "Mr. O'Malley left yesterday afternoon," he informed her. "Paid his bill in full and took his belongings. Didn't say where he was headed. He's gone." Daisy felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. "But that can't be right. He would have said goodbye." The clerk shrugged. "All I know is he's not here anymore, miss." Daisy wandered back onto the street, confused and hurt. Had she misunderstood everything? Had their conversations, the looks they'd shared, meant nothing to him? The thought made her chest ache. She was so distracted that she nearly collided with Sheriff Tanner outside the post office. "Whoa there, Miss Valmont," the sheriff said, steadying her with a hand on her arm. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm sorry, Sheriff. I wasn't watching where I was going." She attempted to move past him, but he held up a hand. "Actually, I'm glad I ran into you. Been hearing you've been spending time with that stranger, O'Malley, at the saloon." Something in his tone made her defensive. "He's been a perfect gentleman." "I'm sure he has." The sheriff stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "But I got a wire from Sacramento yesterday. Seems our Mr. O'Malley isn't exactly what he claims to be." Daisy's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "There was a U.S. Marshal named Quincy O'Malley. Distinguished record, but he was killed in the line of duty 2 years ago in Dodge City, Kansas." The sheriff watched her reaction carefully. Whoever your friend is, he's using a dead man's name. That makes me mighty suspicious." "There must be some mistake," Daisy insisted, though doubt had already begun to creep in. "Perhaps there are two marshals with the same name." "Perhaps," the sheriff conceded, though his expression suggested he thought otherwise. "But I'd advise caution, Miss Valmont. We don't know who this man really is or what he wants in Petaluma." Daisy thanked the sheriff and continued on her way, her mind whirling with questions. Who was the man she'd been speaking with every night? Had everything he told her been a lie? That evening, she took her place at the piano with a heavy heart, going through the motions of playing but finding no joy in the familiar melody. The saloon seemed emptier somehow, despite the usual crowd of patrons. Just before 9, the doors swung open and Quentin walked in. Relief flooded through her at the sight of him, quickly followed by confusion and anger. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and a new tension in his shoulders. He scanned the room as always, his gaze finally landing on her at the piano. Daisy continued playing, refusing to acknowledge him with so much as a glance. She heard rather than saw him approach, his footsteps stopping just beside the piano. "Daisy," he said softly, her name almost lost beneath the music. She finished the piece before finally looking up at him, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. O'Malley, or is that even your name?" Surprise flickered across his face, followed by resignation. "I see the sheriff got his telegram. You lied to me." Her voice was steady despite the hurt churning inside her. "About who you are." "Not about everything," he said, his eyes pleading for understanding. "May I sit, please?" "I can explain." Against her better judgment, Daisy nodded, moving over on the piano bench to make room for him. He sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "My real name is Quincy Ormond," he began, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I was a U.S. Marshal, that much was true. Worked alongside Quentin O'Malley for 5 years. He was more brother than partner to me." He paused, pain evident in his features. "When he died in that shootout in Dodge, I was there. Should have been me that took that bullet." Daisy remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "After his death, I resigned my position. Couldn't bear to continue without him. But a few months later, I learned the men responsible for his death were still at large. The Hargrove brothers." His jaw tightened. "The authorities weren't making any progress tracking them down. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. You've been hunting them all this time, using Quentin's name," he nodded slowly. "It started as a way to honor him carrying on his work, then it became useful. The Hargroves know Quincy Ormond is after them, but Quentin O'Malley, he's just another lawman to them, gives me an advantage. And that's why you're in Petaluma. You believe these men are here. They were," he corrected. "I tracked them to a farm outside town. That's where I was yesterday." He hesitated, then added, "I caught up with 2 of them. Roy and Elmer Hargrove. They won't be troubling anyone anymore." The implication was clear. Daisy swallowed hard, trying to reconcile the gentle man who had listened to her play night after night with someone capable of such actions. "And the third brother?" she asked quietly. "Jasper." "The youngest, he wasn't there." Frustration crossed Quincy's face. "But I'll find him, I have to. Because of your promise. Because until all 3 are brought to justice, Quentin can't rest." His eyes, when they met hers, were filled with a mixture of determination and regret. "I'm sorry I wasn't honest with you from the start, Daisy. I never expected to." He trailed off, unable to find the words. "To what?" she pressed. "To find something worth staying for," he finished softly. "Your music, your kindness. They reminded me there's still beauty in this world, even after everything I've seen." Daisy felt her resolve weakening. She wanted to believe him, to trust that beneath the deception was the man she'd come to care for over the past week. I understand if you want nothing more to do with me, he continued when she remained silent. But I needed you to know the truth. All of it. Will you leave once you find Jasper Hargrove? She asked, the question that had been weighing on her mind since the sheriff's revelation. Quincy hesitated. I don't know, he answered honestly. I've been chasing ghosts for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to live among the living. His words struck a chord within her. Hadn't she been doing the same in her own way? Clinging to her father's favorite song, playing it night after night, as though the familiar notes could somehow bring him back. Play with me, she said suddenly, positioning her hands over the keys. I don't know how to play, he protested. I'll show you, just the simplest part. She took his right hand, guiding his index finger to a key. Press here when I nod. Confused but willing, Quincy followed her instruction. Daisy began to play Beautiful Dreamer, nodding when she needed his single-note contribution. It was clumsy at first, his timing off, but gradually they found a rhythm together. When the song ended, Daisy kept her hands on the keys, afraid to look at him. My father used to say music heals what words cannot, she said softly. I've been playing this song for years, trying to keep him with me, but maybe it's time for new memories too. Quincy's hand moved to cover hers on the piano. Daisy, he said, her name a question and a promise all at once. She finally turned to meet his gaze. I don't know if I can trust you, Quincy Ormond, but I'd like the chance to try. The relief in his eyes was palpable. That's more than I deserve, he said. But I swear to you no more lies. Whatever happens next, you'll know the truth of it. Starting with finding Jasper Hargrove, she stated firmly. And this time you won't do it alone. Daisy, no, it's too dangerous. I'm not suggesting I join you in a gunfight, she interrupted. But Petaluma is my home. I know people. I hear things. Let me help you end this, so perhaps you can finally begin to live again. He studied her face for a long moment before nodding slowly. All right, but you'll be careful. Promise me. I promise. She smiled slightly. Now, would you like to hear the song again, properly this time without your assistance? The tension between them eased as Quincy chuckled. I'd like nothing better. Over the next few days, Daisy became Quincy's eyes and ears in town. She listened to conversations at the saloon, spoke with shopkeepers and the women who came to Mabel's for afternoon drinks. Gradually, a picture began to form of a stranger who had arrived in town shortly after the Hargrove brothers, a man who kept to himself, renting a small cabin on the outskirts of town, only coming in for supplies once a week. Could be anyone, Quincy said when she shared this information. Plenty of men prefer solitude. The general store owner mentioned he bought an unusual amount of bandages and whiskey last week, Daisy added. As if someone might be injured, Quincy's expression sharpened. Roy took a bullet before I caught up to them. I wondered how bad it was. The cabin is about 3 miles east of town, near Copper Creek, Daisy said. Mr. Peterson at the livery says it used to belong to old Jim Wallace before he passed last year. No one's officially bought it, but smoke's been seen from the chimney recently. You've learned all this just from talking to people, Quincy asked, impressed. People talk to the piano player, she replied with a small smile. We're practically invisible, just part of the background. Not to me, he said quietly. Never to me. The warmth in his eyes made her heart flutter. Over the past few days, as they'd worked together, something had shifted between them. The betrayal of his deception hadn't been forgotten, but it had been contextualized. She understood now the burden of grief and guilt that had driven him to assume his friend's identity. What will you do now? She asked. I need to check out that cabin, he replied, his expression turning serious. But carefully, if it is Jasper, he'll be expecting me, especially after what happened to his brothers. When will you go? Tomorrow at first light. His hand found hers on the piano bench. "I'll come back, Daisy, I promise you that." She turned her hand to clasp his. "See that you do, Quincy Ormond. I'm expecting to play for you tomorrow night." The next day was the longest of Daisy's life. She went about her usual routine, helping at the milliner's shop in the morning, practicing her scales in the afternoon. But her mind was constantly with Quincy, imagining him approaching the cabin, confronting the dangerous man inside. By the time she arrived at the saloon that evening, her nerves were stretched to breaking point. There had been no word, no sign of him all day. Mabel noticed her distraction as she played the same wrong note 3 times in a row. "He'll be fine," the older woman reassured her during a break. "Men like that know how to handle themselves." "You don't understand," Daisy replied, twisting her handkerchief between her fingers. "This isn't just any outlaw. This man killed Quincy's best friend, and his brothers will have told him Quincy or Quentin, as they knew him, was on their trail." "All the more reason for your man to be careful," Mabel pointed out. "Now, go play something to settle these rowdy miners before they start breaking my furniture." Daisy returned to the piano, forcing herself to focus on the familiar melody. She had played Beautiful Dreamer so many times over the years that her fingers found the notes automatically, leaving her mind free to worry. The saloon doors opened, and her head jerked up in hope. But it was only a group of ranch hands coming in after a day's work. Her disappointment must have shown on her face because one of them called out, "Don't look so sad, Miss Valmont. We ain't that ugly, are we?" The others laughed good-naturedly, and Daisy managed a polite smile in return. She continued playing, though each minute that passed without Quincy's appearance made her heart sink further. By 10 o'clock, the saloon was crowded and noisy, but there was still no sign of him. Daisy played mechanically now, her eyes constantly darting to the door. Sheriff Tanner had come in an hour ago, giving her a significant look that suggested he knew what Quincy was up to, but he hadn't approached her. Just as she finished her song, the batwing doors swung open once more. Daisy's breath caught in her throat as a figure stepped inside, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar. Quincy. Relief flooded through her until she noticed his appearance. His shirt was torn and dirty, a dark stain spreading across one shoulder that looked suspiciously like blood. His face was drawn with exhaustion and pain, but his eyes sought hers immediately. She rose from the piano bench, heedless of the curious glances from patrons as she hurried toward him. He took a step forward to meet her, then swayed dangerously. "Quincy." She gasped, reaching him just as his knees buckled. Sheriff Tanner appeared at her side, helping to support Quincy's weight. "Let's get him to Doc Mitchell's," he said grimly. Together they half-carried Quincy out of the saloon and down the street to the doctor's house. Daisy's heart pounded with fear as she felt the warm stickiness of blood seeping through his shirt and onto her hand. Dr. Mitchell answered his door promptly, taking one look at Quincy's condition before ushering them inside. "On the table," he instructed, already rolling up his sleeves. They managed to get Quincy onto the examination table in the doctor's surgery room. He was conscious but dazed, his eyes finding Daisy's face as she stood anxiously beside him. "Found him," he murmured. "Jasper. He was waiting." "SHH, don't try to talk now," she soothed, brushing the hair from his forehead. The doctor cut away Quincy's shirt, revealing an angry wound in his left shoulder. "Bullet went through clean," he announced after examining it. "Lucky man. Half an inch to the right and we'd be having a very different conversation." "Can you fix him?" Daisy asked, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "I can, but it won't be pleasant." Dr. Mitchell looked at Sheriff Tanner. "You might want to take the young lady outside for this part." "I'm staying," Daisy said firmly, taking Quincy's hand in hers. "I won't leave him." The sheriff nodded approvingly. "I'll wait outside then. O'Malley, or whatever your real name is, will need to talk when you're patched up." After the sheriff left, the doctor began cleaning the wound. Quincy gritted his teeth against the pain, his grip tightening on Daisy's hand. "Jasper Hargrove?" the doctor asked casually as he worked. "Dead," Quincy replied, his voice strained. "Self-defense. He fired first." Dr. Mitchell nodded, unsurprised. "I treated his brother Roy about a week ago. Bullet wound to the leg, claimed it was a hunting accident," he snorted. "Never did believe that story." "You knew who they were?" Daisy asked, shocked. "Had my suspicions. Descriptions matched the wanted posters." The doctor prepared a needle and thread. "This is going to hurt, son. Bite down on this." He offered Quincy a folded piece of leather. Quincy shook his head. "Just do it, Doc. I've had worse." Daisy didn't look as the doctor began stitching the wound, focusing instead on Quincy's face. His jaw was clenched tight, sweat beading on his forehead, but he didn't make a sound. She stroked his hair and whispered words of comfort, wishing she could take away his pain. When it was finally over, Dr. Mitchell applied a clean bandage and gave Quincy a dose of laudanum for the pain. "He'll need rest," he told Daisy, "and someone to change these bandages and watch for signs of infection." "I'll take care of him," she promised without hesitation. The doctor raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. "He can stay here tonight. Tomorrow, if he's stronger, you can move him somewhere more comfortable." Sheriff Tanner returned then, his expression grave. "Doc, can he answer a few questions?" "Briefly," the doctor conceded. "The laudanum will take effect soon." The sheriff pulled up a chair beside the table. "Mr. Ormond, yes. I know your real name now, too. I need to know exactly what happened at that cabin." Quincy recounted the events in a voice growing increasingly drowsy from the medication. He had approached the cabin cautiously at dawn, but Jasper had been prepared. There was an exchange of gunfire, during which Quincy took a bullet to the shoulder. Despite his injury, he had managed to return fire, hitting Jasper fatally. "Bodies are still there," Quincy concluded, his words beginning to slur. "Couldn't bring him back. Too weak from blood loss." "I'll send my deputies out first thing in the morning," the sheriff assured him. "For what it's worth, I've seen the wanted posters. Those men needed stopping." He stood, adjusting his hat. "Rest now. We'll talk more tomorrow." As the laudanum took full effect, Quincy's eyelids grew heavy. "Daisy," he murmured, fighting to stay awake. "Will you play for me?" "There's no piano here," she said softly, still holding his hand. "Hum it then, please." Daisy glanced at the doctor, who nodded permission. She began to hum "Beautiful Dreamer," the melody that had brought them together. Quincy's eyes drifted closed, a peaceful expression settling over his features as he finally succumbed to the medicine. "You should get some rest too, Miss Valmont," Dr. Mitchell suggested. "There's a spare room upstairs if you wish to stay." "Thank you," she said gratefully. "I'd like to be nearby if he needs anything." The doctor studied her face thoughtfully. "You care for him a great deal, don't you?" "Yes," she admitted, seeing no point in denial. "I know it seems sudden, but—" "The heart has its own timeline," the doctor said with a small smile. "My late wife agreed to marry me after knowing me just 10 days. We had 37 happy years together." His words gave Daisy hope as she settled into the chair beside Quincy's bed, where the doctor's assistant had helped move him. She watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, marveling at how this man had entered her life just days ago and already become so essential to it. Morning came with soft light filtering through the curtains. Daisy awoke stiff from sleeping in the chair to find Quincy watching her, his eyes clear and alert. "Good morning," he said, his voice stronger than she expected. "How do you feel?" she asked, moving to check his bandage. "Like I've been shot," he replied with a hint of his usual dry humor. "But better than I have any right to. The doctor says you were lucky." Luck had nothing to do with it, Quincy said, reaching for her hand. I had a reason to come back. Her heart swelled at his words. Before she could respond, Dr. Mitchell entered with a breakfast tray. Good, you're awake and coherent, the doctor said briskly. Fever-free too, by the looks of it. Eat something and then we'll see about getting you up. To Daisy's surprise, Quincy recovered quickly over the next few days. By the end of the week, he was strong enough to move to the room he had taken at the hotel. Sheriff Tanner confirmed his account of what had happened at the cabin, ruling the shooting of Jasper Hargrove as self-defense. What will you do now? The sheriff asked Quincy when he came to give his official statement. Your mission's completed, so to speak. Quincy glanced at Daisy, who had scarcely left his side during his recovery. I'm considering my options, he said carefully. Later, as they walked slowly through the town square, Quincy's arm in a sling but his strength returning daily, he broached the subject Daisy had been afraid to mention. I sent a telegram to Sacramento yesterday, he said, to my former superior at the marshal's office. Daisy's heart sank. You're going back? No, he said quickly, seeing her expression. Just the opposite, in fact. I'm officially closing this chapter. The Hargroves are gone. Quentin can rest now. He paused, turning to face her. And Quincy O'Malley needs to start living again. Hope bloomed in her chest. Here. In Petaluma. If there's someone worth staying for, he said softly, his free hand finding hers. There is, she whispered, squeezing his fingers. There absolutely is. I don't have much to offer, he warned. Some savings from my martial days. Experience that doesn't translate well to civilian life. Sheriff Tanner mentioned he could use a deputy, Daisy said. Someone with your experience. Quincy looked surprised. He offered me a job this morning when you were resting. He said a man with your skills shouldn't be wasted. She smiled. I think he's impressed with how you handled the Hargroves, even if your methods were unorthodox. A deputy, Quincy mused, considering the idea. Wearing a badge again, my own badge this time. It would mean staying in Petaluma, Daisy pointed out, trying not to sound too eager. It would, he agreed, a smile spreading across his face, and hearing a certain song every night. You'll grow tired of it eventually, she teased, echoing her words from before. Never. His expression grew serious. Daisy, I know we've known each other a short time and I haven't given you much reason to trust me, but these past few days, having you by my side, they've meant everything to me. They've meant everything to me too, she admitted, her heart pounding. Then perhaps, when I'm fully recovered, you might consider letting me court you properly. With your permission, of course. Joy surged through her. You don't need to wait until you're recovered for that, she said. My answer is yes. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Daisy's life. Quincy took the deputy position and proved himself so capable that the townspeople quickly forgot he had ever been anyone but Deputy Ormond. Every evening, he would finish his rounds and come to the saloon just in time to hear Daisy play her one song. You know, he said one night as they walked back to her boarding house, you could learn another piece if you wanted to. I could help you practice. Daisy looked at him in surprise. You don't play? No, but I can turn the pages and tell you when you hit a wrong note, he said with a grin. Though I doubt I'd know the difference, she laughed, then grew thoughtful. I'm not sure I want to learn another song. This one, it's special now, not just because of my father anymore. Because of us, he finished for her. Yes, she smiled up at him. Though perhaps someday, we could teach our children to play something different. Quincy stopped walking, his expression suddenly serious. Our children, Daisy blushed, realizing what she had inadvertently revealed. I mean that is if you ever wanted. He cut her off by pulling her into his arms, mindful of his healing shoulder. Daisy Valmont, are you proposing to me? I think that's supposed to be your job, she replied, trying to hide her embarrassment. "Then I'd better do it properly." To her astonishment, he lowered himself to one knee right there on Main Street. "I was going to wait until I had a ring, but it seems you're ahead of me as usual." He took her hand in his. "Daisy, from the first night I heard you play, you brought music back into my life when I thought it was gone forever. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of happiness filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Quincy, I will." They were married in the spring of 1877, a simple ceremony in the town's small church. Mabel insisted on hosting the celebration at the Golden Nugget, declaring it only fitting since that was where their romance had begun. Sheriff Tanner gave the bride away, and Dr. Mitchell stood as Quincy's best man. For their wedding gift, the townspeople pooled their resources and purchased a small upright piano for their new home, a modest but comfortable house on the edge of town. "Now you can play whenever you want, not just at the saloon," Mabel told her with a wink. "Though we'll still expect you on Saturday nights. The customers miss you." That evening, as Daisy and Quincy stood in their new home, she sat at the piano and patted the space beside her on the bench. "Would you like to hear our song, Mr. Ormond?" "Always, Mrs. Ormond," he replied, settling beside her. "Though I think I've finally learned enough to help." To her delight, he placed his hands on the keys and played a simple bass line to accompany her melody, the result of secret lessons he'd been taking with the church organist. "You learned to play for me?" she asked, deeply touched. "Just enough to accompany you," he said softly. "One song is all we need." As they played together, the familiar notes taking on new meaning in their home, Daisy knew that while she might only play one song, it contained a lifetime of love within its melody, past, present, and the promising future that stretched before them. Over the years that followed, the Ormonds became fixtures in Petaluma society. Quincy eventually became sheriff when Tanner retired, serving the community with the same dedication he had once shown as a marshal. Daisy continued to play at the saloon on Saturday nights, a tradition that persisted even after their children were born, first a son they named Harrison, after Quincy's fallen partner, and later twin daughters, Melody and Grace. All three children learned to play the piano, though they mastered far more complicated pieces than their mother's single song. Yet whenever the family gathered around the piano in their home, it was always "Beautiful Dreamer." They requested first the song that had brought their parents together, the melody that had healed two broken hearts and created a family where once there had been only loneliness. And on quiet evenings, long after the children had gone to bed, Quincy would often ask Daisy to play it one more time, just for him. She never refused, for in those familiar notes lived their entire story of redemption, of second chances, and of a love that had begun with a single song, played night after night, until it found its perfect harmony.